Welcome to another edition of Here's Why. And we're right in the middle of our season on sales. It doesn't have to be a dirty word. And what we're really doing is putting together the framework to help you build and create a business that can absolutely thrive in any economy.
Yep.
So so you can grow and scale regardless of what the economic outlook looks like. I shouldn't have used look twice there, but we did.
No, it
and
sounded
we're going to
great.
keep moving forward. So today we're going to be talking about mindset, and Jeremy's going to go through and talk a little bit about creating a mindset of a salesperson, and if you're the salesperson or the business owner, your mindset, and then we're going to get into creating the mindset and the culture within your organization that is going to get everybody working aligned with each other and get everyone working in as one cohesive unit, and a place where people want to work, a place where people want to achieve their goals and be successful. So
Yeah.
why don't you kick us off on a sales mindset?
All right, you ready to be kicked off? Let's kick it off. All right, now I think really like mindset, when you hear it, like a lot of people are like, what's this? You know what I mean? Like you hear a lot of people talk about it, and there's a lot of stuff out there that is what some people might say is kooky mumbo jumbo. I don't think that's a real word. Well, fluff, and also there's a lot of like whether it's spiritual or certain things that not everybody agrees with, right? Like everybody has their own opinion about whether it's religion or whatever, and they think of mindset as like some kooky mumbo jumbo. But eliminating kooky mumbo jumbo, I don't think that's a real word. So I'm gonna keep saying it.
Yeah.
But if you could look at mindset without those lenses, right, and just look at it, it's a way for you to trick your mind into allowing you to do something that's actually going to help you be successful. Because our mind is literally, this is an old saying, I mean, this isn't new, like, you're your own worst enemy.
But it's true.
It is. We are our own worst enemy.
Yeah.
And where does the battlefield happen? Right in our minds. So we have to be able to get into the right mindset to attain the levels of success that we want to obtain. And it seems like most people I know, they get to one level and they're stuck there and they wonder why. And it's because they have, limiting beliefs that are preventing them from actually moving forward.
Absolutely.
They have false stories. Like we go through life. Well, what is it in psychology? It's like you have your product of your environment and your genetics. What is that called? It's called something. I forget what it is, but it's either your genetic makeup or the way you were raised in your environment. It's nurture versus nature. That's what it is. Nurture versus nature, right? So we go through our lives and things happen to us and habits get created. So it's not just, your genes, it's what happens in our lives. And we create these false stories, whether it's like, we're not good enough, or like all these different things that you don't think about, but subconsciously are going on that you need to be able to overcome.
We put these glass ceilings in our lives, and because of those, we can't rise above that. And as soon as you do, then it's your mindset can shift.
Yeah.
And you can keep building and keep going. And thriving, right?
Yeah, you hear a lot of successful people talk about it. Like they have the same self-doubts as everybody else. They have the same fears as everybody else, but why are they able to get past it? Well, they've done a lot of work in mindset. They have a coach. They have a mentor. They have people helping them through these things to push aside the emotions and the fears that they have to actually obtain that next level and get the results. And I think one of the things that happens is if you keep getting the same result over and over again, how can you change that pattern, right? And it all comes down to your brain, which is why I want to talk about mindset right now.
Perfect.
So back to being our own worst enemy. I think a lot of people don't really think about it like this, but I do, is our minds were designed to prevent us from pain, right?
Yeah.
It's like back in the day, what was it like? You're running through the plains of Africa as a caveman. You see a lion. The first thing is fight or flight, right? You're running to avoid the pain of being eaten by a freaking lion, right? When you're a kid and you're at the campground and you stick your hand in the fire, you don't have to think, oh my God, that fire's hot. I need to avoid that by pulling my hand out. You immediately pull a hand out because your brain is wired to avoid pain. And what a lot of people don't think about is that feeling uncomfortable is painful. You know, if you're in think about it, now's the perfect time to talk about this. If you're, if you lean, say, one way politically, and you're in a room full of people that lean the other way politically, you're going to feel freaking uncomfortable nowadays, right? Because there's such a hatred between both sides that you're going to feel uncomfortable. And we want to avoid that at all costs, right? We want to avoid feeling uncomfortable when, my wife tells me that we have to go to a birthday party at this person's house. Well, I don't get along with that person. I feel uncomfortable when I'm there. I'm going to come up with every excuse in the book not to go to that birthday party, right? Like, we all have these little things that we try to avoid feeling uncomfortable. We want to be comfortable, and we want to stay comfortable, but growth doesn't happen.
Growth happens when you're uncomfortable.
Absolutely. Which reminds me of the lobster. Have you heard about the lobster?
I've not.
Ooh, let me tell you about the lobster. So this is interesting, right? So a lobster is an exoskeleton. See, I paid attention in science class in middle school. And they grow on the inside until their shell isn't growing, right? They get so uncomfortable inside of this shell, and they don't want to do it. They don't want to do it because it's dangerous in the ocean, right? They can get eaten at any time.
Yeah.
And if they shed their shell, which is their only protection, they are super vulnerable in a sea of monsters. Mm-hmm. So they don't want to do it. They wait until they're super uncomfortable and they go under a rock or something. They shed their shell. They're able to grow a new shell that's bigger, that has a lot of space, and then they grow a little bit more, and then they get uncomfortable, and they do that over and over and over again to something tiny, 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 to a Maine lobster that you get to eat one day, right?
Sure.
Hopefully it gets that big because I'm hungry and I want it now. But that's exactly what we do as humans. Is we get uncomfortable, and that's where growth happens. In order to grow like a lobster, we have to be uncomfortable. And in our businesses especially, we have to put ourselves in a place of being uncomfortable, because that's where we're going to learn, that's where we're going to grow, and that's where we're going to be able to increase our revenues.
And a word that you said there that I want to emphasize is vulnerability. You got to be vulnerable to be able to grow and be successful.
Yeah, right? It's a scary thing to do a video and put yourself on the interwebs for everybody to see, and then you have self-doubts like everybody else, and what are they going to think? Are they think I was stupid? It's like, well, thank God I don't care about that part, because I can look stupid anytime, but
you don't
it's
need
not
the help
that easy
of a
for
video
everybody.
to look stupid.
Yeah, I don't need a video to do that, but it's not easy. But like what everybody, if you listen or follow anybody that's had any kind of success, they're going to tell you the same thing. They had the same fears, they had the same self-doubts, they had the same self-talk, and the only thing that helped them overcome that was being comfortable being uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But you can't just do that. That's easier said than done. And that's why you need to work with a mentor or a coach, somebody that can see what you're doing and hear what you're dealing with to help you overcome that, to get rid of those things. And just talking a little bit about the stories that we tell ourselves. Like, how many times when you first got into sales, when you pick up the phone and you go, right before you do it, you're like about to dial and you go, it's about dinner time in Florida. We're 3 hours ahead. I probably shouldn't call them right now because they're going to get mad about eating dinner time.
Right.
Like, we create these false stories in our heads that give us, because our brain is our own worst enemy, our brain is coming up with all these stories telling us why we shouldn't do something. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like, don't do that video. That person's going to think you're a moron for that. Don't do that video. You're going to have controversy. People are going to hate you. People are not going to like you. People are going to call you whatever, and because the internet can be mean, and I don't want to read those comments. All these things go on in our head, like, all the time, and we really need to understand what they're saying to us, but recognize that it's just a story, and it's not real, it's false, and that you're either going to be sold by yourself on why not to do something, or you can recognize it and retrain and program your brain to say, hey, I don't care what you're saying, brain. I'm going to do this because I'm looking for this result.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And part of that is, something that I've learned, and it's not something that you can shift overnight, but getting to a point where your happiness is no longer validated, or your validation is not what's dictating your happiness.
Right.
And your happiness is not something that is manifested onto you by the rest of the world, or what the fear that you may, that you don't want the rest of the world to judge you a certain way,
Yeah.
or things like that. And it's really insane, and it's something that you have to be aware of, and you really, especially if you're running a business, you have to constantly check yourself before you wreck yourself. You see what I did there?
I do. I like that. I like that. From the wise words of Ice Cube. He is absolutely right, though, right? And what's interesting is when you said that, we're all human beings, and we all have this. We're not different from anybody else. Human, and we all do this. We can recognize that we have this internal mechanism that wants us to protect and preserve our self-image. We don't want other people out there thinking that we're dumb, stupid, mean, bad, ugly, whatever, right? And this goes back all the way. Think about even in elementary school. Remember, your teacher would ask the class a question. All right, class, what's 2 plus 4? And 2 people raised their hand. And everybody but the 2 dumb kids in the back of the class, didn't know the answer, but everybody else knew the answer, but only 2 of them raised their hands. Why does everybody else not raise their hand? Think about when last time you were at a seminar with hundreds of people, and the speaker got up and said, how many of you, want to make $1 million? Like 5 people raise their hand. Like, no, the whole room does. That's why they're there. But they don't want to raise their hand because they're afraid the person behind them will think they're a moron for participating.
Unless it's a rah-rah seminar.
Unless it's a rah-rah seminar. Everybody does it,
Yeah.
But think about the last time someone asked you a question and you didn't raise your hand because you didn't want to be wrong in front of other people. That's preserving your self-image. And when you can get past the need to preserve your self-image, there's a freedom from that's going to allow you to break through and do the things that you need to do and be comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And you're 100% right. And I can't even add anything more to that you didn't already say, because it was spot on.
Nice. So it's good. And that takes me into like limiting beliefs, right? Like people that and really limiting belief is all just saying that I can't do this because of this, So like, what would be a story like, I can't call this person because it's dinner time in Florida. I can't call this person right now because I called him 3 times in the last week and he's going to think I'm hounding him. I can't put out this marketing because people are going to think I'm an idiot. I can't launch this funnel because it's not perfect. Anytime you're saying
I can't ask for the business because I'm concerned about them saying no. And that's something that people, they don't even realize they're telling themselves things like that.
It's subconscious.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I can't ask for the business because I don't want them to think that I'm salesy.
Yeah.
I don't want to ask for the business because I don't want them to not like me. I've heard that one before. I don't want them to not like me. And when it comes to, especially in your own business, when it comes to what other people think, if I'm not willing to ask for the business because I'm concerned with what other people think, the revenue that I get from asking for the business is what keeps my business afloat.
Yeah.
It's the lifeblood of any business. And the only way to get it is to ask for it. And I'm more concerned about what this person who I may never ever see again in my life thinks about my self-image, when I should be more focused on what do my kids think? What do my family think about what I'm doing to provide for them? Oh, Susie can't get a college education because Daddy didn't want to ask for the business because he was concerned about Jimbo Jones liking him. When you put it in that perspective, it's absolute madness.
Yeah.
And again, we have to train ourselves to be uncomfortable or be comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Absolutely.
But yeah, I mean, that goes into a little bit of self-doubt that everybody has, and again, it's all subconscious. We tell ourselves things like, I'm not worthy, or I'm not good enough, or I don't deserve this, and hopefully with me just saying it, some of you can relate to it, because a lot of people don't know it. It's like a blind spot. They don't even see that it's there.
I'll give you an example of that. So, when for those of you who don't know, I guess, Jeremy and I, years and years ago, both worked at a company called Infusionsoft. They're called Keep now. And there, we, especially early on, when you and I were there, you had the opportunity to work with people who were some of the most successful marketers and entrepreneurs in the world. And the best way to, because the product was a sales and marketing automation platform.
Yeah.
And so the best way to sell it was to kind of educate people and teach people and break down their sales and marketing funnel.
Yep.
And so with that, I remember early on, it was a little bit intimidating because I'm talking to this guy who is a sales and marketing guru. You know, if you're talking to someone from Zig Ziglar's team about their sales and marketing, that can be intimidating, right? Because they know sales. That's these guys. That's what they do.
They're judging me.
They train salespeople, but in reality, you had to overcome that doubt to be able to do it. And as when you started to do that, people appreciate it. It really, people who were experts sometimes appreciated it a lot more because maybe they hadn't looked at something the same way you had and things like that. But that was something that, like I said, speaking from personal experience, it was intimidating at first, but you do it, and I grew from it. I think they grew from it, and everybody won.
Yeah, and I'm sure you could recognize that, like, once your confidence grew when you were there,
so
being able
much
to
easier.
talk, it's so much easier. Like, confidence is so huge when it comes to sales, and it's not like a cockiness confidence where it's like, I'm the freaking best guy since sliced bread, because nobody wants to deal with that guy anyway.
And usually those people aren't the actual authentic. Aren't
They aren't being
authentically
authentic.
being confident, which is something that we talk about in the sales episode, which is before this one.
Right.
You can watch that one as well if you want more on authenticity. But when you're authentically confident, there's nothing wrong with that.
Absolutely.
And it's very different from being fake and cocky.
Right. Exactly. So one of the things, in just talking about mindset, I want to give you a little exercise. I want to give you some value because this is something that has worked really, really well in my life as well. And I'll give you an example. It was soon after I learned this. You know what? What's funny is I actually learned this at Infusionsoft, and I never applied it. I never did anything with it. And it wasn't until years later that somebody mentioned it to me, and I was like, "Oh my God, that's amazing." I'm like, "Wait a second, that sounds really familiar." Gosh, I just wasted, 8 years of my life not doing it. You know what I mean?
Something that you knew.
Something that I knew. And that's so funny is that we know a lot of things, but we forget, it seems like, even more.
Sometimes
it just
needs
the refresher.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just got to get back to the basics. And there's nothing, and that's why every successful person you talk to is like, I got a mentor, I got a coach, I got somebody to help me remember these things because we can't remember them all. I need someone pointing out my self-doubts. I need people pointing these things out because it's all subconscious. But once it comes to the front of mind, like, oh, I'm dealing with the self-doubt here, then it breaks away and you're able to have the confidence you need to be successful.
On the note of mentor, I just want to give you a little bit of a plug. So if anyone's looking for a sales coaching or sales mentor, leadership coaching, I recommend you go to jeremykennerson.com. That's this guy. And take a look at the different things he has available on his website, as well as, request a consultation. He's not a pushy dude. It's something that does make a big difference in people's life. So
yeah, and I think
go ahead, but I just wanted to...
that's a good point. And I know we talked about sales earlier, but that's one of the things that I teach that's so important is to not be pushy. But if somebody's going to invest the time on a phone call with you, like, make sure they walk away with some value. Make sure you're giving them something that made the phone call worth it to them.
Right.
And that's what I like to do on every call. I remember back in the day, people don't do this anymore, but when we first started at Infusionsoft, we used to do website evaluations. Like, we would actually evaluate people's website, take the time. So if they didn't become a customer, they still walked away with some valuable information to help their business. So the thing that I learned there that I kind of like disregarded and found out later is a process. And if you kind of think about it like this, like, if I keep getting the same result over here in my life and I'm sick of getting that result, how can I reverse engineer what's happening to get a different result, right? And there's something, what was it that happened? It was my daughter's birthday, and I remember something would happen. Me and my wife went shopping for my daughter. It was her birthday. She was my daughter wants to be an artist, so we were thinking of we're at Hobby Lobby. We were trying to get some like materials and everything, and I was like, I want to get her a canvas with like the little like thing that you put the paint on, with the thumb, so that she can have the paint. And I wanted to get like a little easel or something for her to be a paint on. I wanted her to feel like an artist from like France or Italy in the Renaissance. Make it fun. Know. And that cost X amount of money. And my wife's like, no, we're gonna get her these things with some oil. I was like, I don't want watercolor paint. I don't know if you've tried watercolor painting. When I was a kid, I hated it. It just smeared colored water over paper and it made it all wrinkly and dumb.
Maybe when you did it, but
I couldn't stay within the lines, okay? But mostly I just wanted her to have fun with it. And I wanted acrylic paints that like she could feel like an artist actually painting a real painting,
Sure.
My wife's like, no, let her practice, like, and I realized something, after I got upset, I felt like my wife wasn't listening to me because I was like, it's her birthday, have fun. And she's like, practical, we want practical, we need to practice on this, we can get a lot more of these little things that she could practice on, that way she has more stuff to practice on. I'm like, fun. She's like, practical. I started feeling like she wasn't listening to me, and I got angry. And normally when I get angry, just like any human being, if we feel like we're not being heard, we get upset. And when we get upset, we normally do something or we don't do something. And then we end up getting a result. So normally I would do something and would make my wife mad at me. And then we would have a bad night and we wouldn't talk to each other. We'd go to bed angry. We'd wake up the next morning like, hey, you sleep good? Yeah, I don't really care. You know what I mean? It's like, that's the end result. So the end result was I could have a bad night. And I don't want to have a bad night. I'm at the age now where I'm like, I don't have many of these trips around the earth that I used to have, and I want to make sure every night is spent optimally or whatever. So I just want to have a good night. So this is kind of the process. So if you think about it, and my result would have been having a bad night. So I can choose not to have a bad night, but we have to, like I said, reverse engineer it. So I want to walk you through this process real quick. I'm going to utilize this whiteboard here, this cool touchscreen whiteboard thingamajigger. Ready? All right, so something happens in our life. Let's call it a circumstance. Woo!
There we go.
That took a lot. We got a circumstance, right? A circumstance happens. Something happens in our life. Like, I think when I first got in business, something major happened in my business. I switched from, who do we used to use at Infusionsoft as PowerPay, and Authorize.net as a merchant account. Well, I ended up switching to Chase Bank, who was my bank. I had a good banker. And I started taking bigger and bigger payments. So I'd have to call in every time and be like, hey, I'm going to charge $10,000. Can you approve that before I run it through? Well, I got sick of doing that and said, hey, just up my limit. They upped my limit. Something happened. They were like, oh, no. They canceled my account. I just ran $6,000. It was right before Christmas. And they're like, okay, we're canceling your account. I'm like, all right, well, just send me my money. They're like, well, we're not going to send it for 6 months. I'm like, what do you mean? They're like, well, the person charged back, like whatever. We need the money in there. That's our policy. You don't get it for 6 months. I'm like, crap. Normally I would have been like, brah, totally blown up and everything, but I'm able to get a better result by running through this process. So that's a circumstance. That's what happened to me. And I could normally go and say, all right, well, this bank did this to me, and I'd have this thought, right? And I'd have this thought that these guys are stupid. They totally suck. I can't stand them. They're wronging me. And I'd have that thought. And then I would have an emotion. All right? Hope we're not running out of space here or wrong this.
You're good.
Bad, but if you can read that, that's emotion. All right? I'm going to blame it on the fact that I'm left-handed. So normally I'd have chalk or whiteboard on my hand right here.
I feel like you should have started on the other side and worked your way over. But
that could have been a better system. Hey, hindsight's 20/20, So we have a circumstance, we have something happen, we have a thought about it, and then we have an emotion. So with the bank, I was angry. That was my emotion. My emotion would have made me have or do, I should say do or don't do an action.
Okay.
Right? So I get angry, My action is I call them up and say, give me my money and I'm going to burn your house down while you're sleeping in it. And then they cancel my account and probably call the cops. And
It's
then
kind of
that would have been
intense
bad.
if you did that.
It would have been intense. Would have been crazy. That's what happens when people get angry, you know? So that's the action I could have done. Or...
That's what happens when people get angry.
Yeah, and then your result is you end up in jail for saying some crazy stuff.
Yeah.
Right? Or they cancel your total account, and now you don't have a bank account at all, and you got to go spend a day, setting up another bank account somewhere else or whatever. But in the instance with my wife, she wanted to buy something practical. I had a thought that she wasn't listening to me, and I had an emotion of anger. And normally I would have said, what the hell? Let's just have fun. What are you doing? And then I would have had a bad night. The result would have been a bad night. But I don't want to have a bad night. So I reverse engineer all of this. Now, here's the weird thing, right? We can't change the circumstance. Whatever happens to you, happens to you. That's life. Things happen. That's why I'm really against people suing people. Because it's like, oh, the doctor, sure, he didn't have to leave the gauze inside your body. But you know what? Nobody's perfect. People make mistakes at their job. It's what happened to you, okay? It's just what happened. We can't change that. We can't change our emotion. Nobody is good enough to change their emotion. When you're angry, you're angry. When you're sad, you're sad. When you're happy, you're happy. You can't just say, put a smile on your face and get through it. That's the emotion. That doesn't change. But what we can change is our thoughts and our actions. And if we do that, we will get a different result. So in our lives, think about it like this in your sales or even in your business as a whole. If you keep getting people that aren't closing or your business isn't going to the next level, what action or inaction are you doing that keeps getting you that same result? And usually you can tie that action or inaction. I say inaction because if I can choose to either do something or not do something.
Right.
So think about if you have a bad day at work and you have something happens, you have a thought, you have an emotion, and your action is, F it, I'm just going to go to the golf course today. That's no action, right? Mm-hmm. So I can choose to not do an action. Now, if you reverse engineer this and you change your thought, let's just use my wife as the example. She says something at the store
she's gonna
where
appreciate
I'm like,
that.
She's going to love this one. It's funny because I actually brought this up to her before using this example. And she's like, I never knew you felt that way. I'm like, I was angry, but you didn't know. Because right when I felt that emotion, right here, I can't change the emotion, okay? Right when I felt angry, I was angry. But I'm trained in this now enough to where when I get an emotion, I can stop and check myself. So before I make an action, I could sit there and I could go back and go, you know what? What was the thought that I just had?
Right.
That made me angry. And the thought was, I was like, well, the thought is she's not listening to me. And I was able to sit there and be with it for a second and change my thought. When I was able to change my thought, I changed it to, okay, not that she's not listening to me, it's that she's trying to be practical. She wants to help our daughter get better. And this is the present that's going to help her. And this is her perspective on the best possible present to get my daughter. What the heck does a guy know about getting a present for a daughter?
Right.
Nothing. That's why she comes to me and helps me ask me to pick out the boys' gifts for Christmas because I pick out the best toys. I'm a guy. I know how to pick out boys' toys. Not very good. So I changed my thought and I was like, you know what? She's just trying to get the best present she knows for her daughter. And immediately when I changed that thought, my emotion changed. And then I was able to have a different action. So instead of being a jerk and being like, oh, you never listen to me and huff off and walk off in a puff, walk off in a huff.
In a huff, yeah.
In a huff. Which if I would have walked off in a huff,
bad night.
I probably wouldn't have got lucky that night. You know what I'm saying? That probably wouldn't have happened. And you know what? I want that to happen. So I went backwards. I changed my thought. Immediately my emotion changed from anger to pretty much nothing, just understanding. And I was able to not react about anything and say, yes, dear, you're absolutely right. We should get this and be practical. And guess what? We had a good night. We went out to dinner. It was absolutely amazing. And if you can write this down, take some notes. Really, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If you can focus on recognizing the emotion when you have it, going backwards and identifying the thought that you had, and change that thought, you're going to be able to change the results that you're getting in almost every aspect of your life.
Yeah, that goes way beyond sales. I think about if you're a business owner, right? How often do whether it's the economic circumstances, whether it's the circumstances of what is going on in maybe one of your employees' lives, that can trigger certain things, right? It can trigger you to get certain thoughts,
right,
which create certain emotions, and then how you act on that. But what are the things that we can control, right?
Right.
Our like you said, we can control those thoughts and think about things. Let's try to look at this a little bit differently, and then we can control what actions we take and what we can do thereafter. So.
Right. And it really goes hand in hand with being able to create the culture that you want inside of your business.
Yeah.
Because when you have a group of people working together on a team, circumstances happen.
Yep.
And people get angry with each other. And if your team isn't working cohesively or calmly together, or whatever the case may be, then your business is going to suffer. So this has been like just a tremendous tool that I've been able to use with my team members to help them identify it, because as the business owner or the manager or whatever, you're managing emotions.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can't manage the emotion, because nobody can change the emotion, but if you can help them recognize the thought that they had, then they're able to change the thought. Now they have a different emotion and a different outcome for the rest of the day. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
We've had quite the tiffs on our teams over the years.
Yeah, definitely.
And it's very important to change that, be able to change that thought to have a different emotion.
Well, let's talk a little bit about culture as well, and how to create also that mindset and everything within your business. Because you look at this, and not only can if each person understands this, I think your business is going to be more successful. But when you have everyone driving on the same goal,
right,
and you have everyone bought in, that's an incredible thing as well. I know we've both seen it in places we've worked together, not even at places when that's created.
Yeah, multiple.
And having certain culture, whatever that culture is, and having those core values of what your business is,
yep,
and who you serve, what you're driving towards, and if you're willing to hire and fire based on those things, if you're willing to let someone go even though they're a super talented person because they don't meet those values of what your business is, well, your business will be more successful long term. Your business will thrive long term.
Yep.
I'm not a firm believer in giving up on anybody, but people have to make decisions in their life as well.
Right.
And if they're not willing to live by those things, then that's your brand that's being represented there.
Right.
By them in one way or another. So.
And it's a tough decision, especially when you're dealing with somebody that possibly was a top performer, and you got a real close relationship, and you're emotionally tied to that person and their success, and that kind of changes. You do everything you possibly can to rectify the situation, but ultimately they are, like you said, representing your brand, and sometimes the tough decisions have to be made. But that ends up helping the culture in the long run.
That's right.
There's a Bible scripture that talks about how God is the vine dresser, right? And sometimes it takes cutting off pieces of the vine. And if anybody has a green thumb, which I do not have a green thumb, understands the importance of pruning and how when you cut off one piece, it actually helps the whole vine as a whole. And I think that imagery really helps, because it's really difficult to make that decision. And, unfortunately, I've had to make that decision. But ultimately, it's not an easy one. But you see somebody else step up into that role of top performer.
Exactly.
Like, it just naturally happens, so you can eliminate the fear. But we have we had a good experience, because the first company we were with didn't have a good culture.
Right.
We were able to create a good culture on our team.
In our group.
Yeah. And we proved that good culture helps.
Absolutely.
A lot, because everybody else was miserable. But but then the other company was night and day. Like when I hired
culture
you,
was amazing.
Yeah. Do you remember what I told you? I said, this is corporate detox.
Yeah. Yeah.
Corporate detox. Because it has an awesome culture. So there's one thing about culture is you need to have a good overall company culture, but also what's very important is the individual, right?
Yeah.
It's important to hire the individual based on the core values of you or your business. If they have the same core values as you, and I look at it mostly for me as like there's one main core value that each person has. For me, it's, I guess it would be two. It's like peace and freedom. So if my whole goal with everybody I work with, it's kind of subconscious, but it's like, if I can get you peace and freedom inside of your business, then I feel like I've accomplished something, which is huge. So everybody that works for me has to have that same core value of peace and freedom. Otherwise, we're running in different directions.
Sure.
And we have to be running in the same direction. We liken it to the bus, right? We want to get, in order to scale our business, we need to get people on the bus, but we need people in the right seats on the bus.
Yeah.
And we need the bus, all the people wanting to go in the same direction, because if they're going in different directions, it creates chaos, frustration within the team.
Yeah.
So there's constant individual checks that you have to do to make sure that people are continuing to be in that same culture, because people change. Yeah. Things change, circumstances change, their life changes, and 6 months from now they might have something else going on where they're like, this is not a good fit for me right now.
Sure.
And most people aren't willing to admit that because it's uncomfortable. And like I said before, they don't want to be uncomfortable because it's uncomfortable switching jobs. So they kind of stay there, sucking the life out of your business subconsciously because they don't want to move on because they're comfortable where they are when they're not growing and they're not helping the business grow. And it's very important to prune to keep that culture going.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, I think that we covered it. We covered mindset of a salesperson. We covered culture and building that cohesive unit as one thing. And we talked a lot about things that you can do and a strategy that you can follow to help shift these things in your life, regardless of what you do, whether you're the salesperson, the business owner, or really anyone, any human can use these things to help their life overall. So
yeah. This is going to go into the next episode of marketing, where you got to understand the mindset of your target market and your perfect customer.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we'll dive in more on that in our next episode. But thank you so much for watching today. Make sure that you like and subscribe, depending on what social media channel this is on. And we will see you next time. Take care.
Bye.